structurally compromised again. Ravi Cobbler sighed as he studied the readout on his tablet, the status indicators for the drilling assembly flashing an angry red. The improvised mining rig had been cobbled together from agricultural equipment never meant for the harsh conditions of space, let alone the abrasive regolith of asteroid KX-724. Behind him, the repurposed cargo hauler Bountiful Harvest drifted in synchronized orbit with the asteroid, its hull still emblazoned with the faded logo of Terran Agricultural Cooperative. 9 months ago, it had been transporting ancient grain varieties, hardy forbs, and specialized cover crop seedlings designed to establish new soil ecosystems on frontier worlds. Now it served as the command center for humanity's most desperate resource acquisition project. "Third breakdown this shift," noted Commander Jared Foster, Earth Defense Fleet's liaison to the operation. "We're falling behind schedule." Ravi resisted the urge to point out that schedule was a generous term for the impossible timeline they'd been given. 1 million metric tons of processed silver within a month, using equipment that was barely holding together, and a crew of miners who, 6 months earlier, had been farmers, merchants, and schoolteachers. "The primary drill bit wasn't designed for metallic extraction," Ravi explained, already calculating the necessary modifications. "We'll need to reconfigure the cutting heads and reinforce the drive shaft. Ella's team is working on it." Foster frowned, the expression deepening the lines on his weathered face. "Earth Command isn't interested in technical limitations, Commander Cobbler. They need results. The Nurax incursion in the Procyon system has accelerated. Without silver countermeasures, we'll lose 3 more colonies within the week." "I'm aware of the stakes, Commander," Ravi replied evenly, "but physics and engineering don't respond to military urgency. We're pushing this equipment well beyond its design parameters." Through the viewport, he could see the extraction teams in their bulky environmental suits moving with practiced efficiency despite their improvised equipment. Most had been civilians until recently, hastily trained and deployed to this remote corner of the Cobrian system. Yet they worked with the dedication of veterans, understanding all too well what failure would mean. The Bountiful Harvest shuddered slightly as another drilling sequence initiated on the asteroid's far side. KX-724 was a metallic asteroid with silver concentrations nearly 5 times higher than Cabria's richest surface deposits, a celestial treasure that could turn the tide of the war if they could extract it efficiently. "How long before we're operational again?" Foster asked, softening his tone slightly. 4 hours for temporary repairs, Ravi calculated, but we'll need to implement a more permanent solution if we're going to meet even half of the production quota. Before Foster could respond, the communication panel chimed with an incoming transmission. The face of Ella Cobbler appeared on the screen, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Ravi, we've completed the preliminary scan of the asteroid's core," she reported. "The silver concentration increases significantly as we go deeper. If we redirect our drilling efforts to coordinates 42 by 173, we could potentially access a vein with nearly 80% pure silver content." "That's within the gravity flux zone," Ravi noted, bringing up the asteroid's structural analysis on his tablet. "The equipment wasn't designed to operate under variable gravitational conditions." "I've been working with Bryn Wheatley on a stabilization system," Ella continued. "It's untested, but the simulations are promising. With this approach, we might actually have a chance at meeting Earth's quota." Ravi exchanged a glance with Foster, seeing the first hint of hope in the commander's eyes. "Have Wheatley prepare a full briefing. We'll meet in the command module in 30 minutes. As the communication ended, Ravi returned his attention to the viewport, watching the distant Earth ships patrolling the outer reaches of the system. The silver they extracted here wouldn't just supply distant battlefronts. It would protect their home planet, where defensive lines were being established in anticipation of the Nurax swarm's arrival. "You really think we can do this?" Foster asked quietly, a rare moment of vulnerability from the career military officer. Ravi thought of how far they had come since that first accidental discovery of silver's effectiveness against the Nurax. From a struggling colony fighting for survival to humanity's primary defense against an ancient threat unleashed across the stars. "We have to," he answered simply. "So we will." The command module of the Bountiful Harvest had once been a comfortable passenger lounge for agricultural inspectors. Now it resembled a military operations center, with holographic displays showing drilling progress, structural integrity readings, and the all-important production metrics that Earth Command monitored constantly. Bryn Wheatley, a weathered farmer from the eastern valleys of Cabria, stood beside a three-dimensional projection of asteroid KX-724, highlighting the newly discovered silver vein deep within its core. Despite having no formal engineering training, Wheatley had become invaluable to the operation for her intuitive understanding of mechanical systems and skills developed over decades of maintaining and improvising agricultural equipment on the frontier. "The concentration is unprecedented," she explained to the assembled team leaders, her calloused hands gesturing to the holographic display with surprising precision. "Based on density scans, we're looking at potentially 2.3 million metric tons of silver in this single deposit. That's more than double Earth's annual consumption before the war." "If we can reach it," Ravi noted. "The gravity fluctuations at that depth would tear apart our standard drilling equipment." Wheatley nodded, switching the display to show a modified extraction system. "That's why we've designed this adaptation. It reminds me of how we used to brace irrigation systems against seasonal flooding back home." She highlighted key components of the design. "It incorporates gravitational stabilizers salvaged from the Artemis's navigational array, combined with reinforced housing we've fabricated from the cargo hauler's spare hull plates." Ella stepped forward, pointing to specific components in the design. "Thank you. The key innovation is this distributed anchor system. Instead of a single drilling shaft, we'll deploy multiple smaller bores in a hexagonal pattern, creating a structural framework that can withstand the variable G-forces." "And the power requirements?" asked Chief Engineer Marshall, a survival expert from one of the rescued colonies who had proven invaluable in adapting equipment for purposes far from their original design. "Significant," Ella admitted. "We'll need to reroute power from non-essential systems and possibly bring the secondary fusion generator online, which leaves us with minimal life support redundancy," Marshall pointed out. Robbie nodded, acknowledging the concern. "I've already discussed this with Admiral Dodge. The Swift messenger is being dispatched with additional power modules and emergency supplies. Expected arrival is in 36 hours. That still leaves us with a 36-hour window of vulnerability," Foster pointed out. "Calculated risk," Robbie replied, "but one worth taking given the potential yield." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They had all become accustomed to operating without safety margins, pushing systems to their limits and beyond. It was the reality of a war that had stretched human resources to the breaking point. "How quickly can we implement this new approach?" Ravi asked, breaking the silence. 18 hours to fabricate the modified equipment," Wheatley answered, with the practical assessment of someone who'd spent a lifetime coaxing reluctant machines to perform. "Another 12 for deployment and calibration. Reminds me of the time we had to rebuild the entire irrigation system during growing season back on Cabria. Same principle. Can't stop the crops from needing water just because your equipment needs fixing." Robbie checked the production schedule on his tablet. "That puts us 72 hours behind the quota timeline. We'll need to increase extraction rates by 35% once the new system is operational to compensate. The processing facilities aboard the Horizon can handle the increased throughput," Ella noted, referring to the converted colony ship now serving as a refinery in high Cabrian orbit. "I've already alerted them to prepare for surge capacity." As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to begin implementing the new plan, Foster remained behind with Ravi, studying the holographic display of the asteroid. "You've built quite an operation in a remarkably short time," the commander observed. "From planetary mining to asteroid extraction in less than a year. Earth's strategic analysts didn't believe it possible." "Necessity," Ravi replied simply. "The same force that drove us to develop the silver countermeasures in the first place." We adapt because we must. Foster nodded, his expression thoughtful. There's something I've been authorized to share with you now that this phase of the operation is underway. Intelligence from the LF-Red artifacts suggests this asteroid belt wasn't formed naturally. Ravi looked up sharply. What do you mean? The pattern of mineral distribution, particularly the silver concentration, appears to be the result of deliberate engineering. The civilization that created the Naor, the ones we've been calling the architects, they may have established these resource deposits as part of their long-term strategic planning. You're suggesting we're mining their war materials? Ravi asked, startled by the implication. The working theory is that they created these mineral-rich asteroids as supply caches for their autonomous defense systems, Foster explained. The Nurax were designed to be self-sustaining, capable of manufacturing new units as needed. These asteroids would have provided the raw materials, which explains the unusually high concentrations of specific metals, Ravi realized. They weren't formed through normal stellar processes. Precisely. And it may explain why the silver is so effective against the Nurax. We're essentially using their own supply chain against them. The irony wasn't lost on Ravi. So we're taking the very materials meant to ensure humanity's destruction and turning them into our salvation. Foster's comm unit chimed with an incoming priority message. Excuse me, he said, stepping away to take the communication. Left alone, Ravi studied the asteroid's projection, seeing it with new eyes. Not just a fortunate discovery, but perhaps a deliberate opportunity, one placed here millions of years ago by the same civilization that had inadvertently seeded the means of their own defeat. When Foster returned, his expression was grim. That was Admiral Dodge. The Nurax swarm in the Procyon system has overwhelmed the Helios colony. Casualties are still being assessed, but they're estimated in the thousands. Ravi felt the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on his shoulders. We need to accelerate the timeline, cancel the safety protocols on the new drilling system, and begin fabrication immediately. That increases the risk to the extraction team significantly, Foster warned. I know. I'll lead the first deployment myself, Ravi decided. We can't afford to wait. 12 hours later, Ravi floated in the darkness of space, his environmental suit illuminated by the helmet lights of his three-person team. Before them loomed the cratered surface of asteroid KX 724, its dark material occasionally glinting with metallic reflections where previous drilling had exposed veins of precious ore. Primary anchor points secured, reported Specialist MacArthur, the magnetic clamps of the stabilization system locking firmly into the asteroid's surface. Gravitational reading steady at 0.06 standard. Proceed with initial bore placement, Ravi directed, monitoring the structural integrity readings on his suit's display. Remember, this region experiences gravitational fluctuations every 43 minutes. We need the framework established before the next cycle. The team worked with practiced efficiency, deploying the hexagonal pattern of smaller drills that would create the structural cage necessary to support the main extraction equipment. Each bore was positioned precisely, creating a network that would distribute the stresses caused by the asteroid's unusual gravitational properties. First pattern complete, Wheatley reported from the bountiful harvest, monitoring their progress remotely with the same attentiveness she once gave to checking soil nutrient levels. Initial integrity readings are within acceptable parameters, holding better than I expected, actually. Deploying secondary anchors, Ravi acknowledged, carefully maneuvering the specialized equipment into position. The work was delicate and dangerous, requiring precision in the awkward confines of the environmental suit. As they worked, Ravi maintained constant awareness of the time. The gravitational fluctuation would begin in just under 15 minutes, potentially disrupting their carefully placed framework if it wasn't properly secured. Warning, came the calm, automated voice in his helmet. Anomalous energy signature detected. Bearing 47, range 12, 0 kilometers. Ravi paused, checking his display. Command, are we expecting any vessels in this sector? Negative, Foster's voice replied, tension evident even through the communication system. Defense perimeter is reporting no scheduled arrivals. Initiate Security Protocol Delta. The implication was clear. Potential Nurax activity. Though no Nurax units had been detected in the Cabrian system since the initial Silver deployment nearly 2 years ago, their ability to remain dormant for millennia made it impossible to declare any region truly secure. Accelerate deployment, Ravi ordered his team. We need this framework operational in 10 minutes. They redoubled their efforts, pushing themselves and their equipment to the limit. The stabilization system was crucial not just for the mining operation but potentially for their very survival if Nurax units were approaching. Energy signature intensifying, Wheatley reported, her voice steady despite having never encountered Nurax before the war. Configuration matches known Nurax patterns. Range now 10,000 kilometers and closing. Extraction teams return to the bountiful harvest immediately, Foster ordered. Security teams prepare defensive positions. Negative, Ravi countermanded. We need 5 more minutes to secure this framework. If we abandon it now, we lose the entire operation. Here was a moment of tense silence before Foster responded. 5 minutes, Commander. Not 1 second more. The team worked feverishly, their movements hampered by the bulky environmental suits, but driven by the knowledge of what was at stake. Around them, the darkness of space seemed to press in, the distant stars cold witnesses to their desperate race against time. Final anchor secured, MacArthur reported, just as the gravitational sensors began to show the first signs of the coming fluctuation. Framework integrity at 92%. That's enough, Ravi decided. Disengage and return to the ship. As they maneuvered away from the asteroid's surface, the first waves of gravitational distortion rippled through the space around them. The framework shuddered but held, its distributed anchor points absorbing and dispersing the stresses as designed. Energy signature now 7,000 kilometers and closing rapidly, Wheatley updated as they approached the airlock. Nurax configuration confirmed. Once inside the bountiful harvest, Ravi rushed to the command module, still in his environmental suit with only the helmet removed. The main display showed the approaching energy signature, a distinctive pattern that had become all too familiar to human defense forces over the past 15 years. Single unit or swarm, he asked, joining Foster at the tactical station. Single, advanced scout unit based on the energy output, Foster replied. Likely a reconnaissance model. Which means the main swarm isn't far behind, Ravi concluded grimly. How soon can we deploy Silver countermeasures? Defense modules prepped and ready, the tactical officer reported. But we've never tested the delivery system in asteroid field conditions. Ravi studied the approaching signature, calculating trajectories and response times. If it's just a scout, it's likely programmed to avoid direct confrontation. Its priority will be gathering intelligence and reporting back to the main swarm. So we let it observe us? Foster asked skeptically. No, Ravi decided to use this opportunity. Lieutenant, prepare a modified countermeasure deployment. Low yield, high dispersion. I want a cloud pattern that will force the scout to either retreat or pass through it. A trap, Foster realized. If we can neutralize the scout before it reports our presence here, we buy time, Ravi explained. More importantly, we may be able to extract valuable data from its remains if the Silver doesn't completely destroy its systems. The tactical team programmed the deployment pattern while the rest of the crew secured for potential combat operations. The bountiful harvest may have begun its life as an agricultural transport, but necessity had transformed it into a makeshift warship with point defense systems and countermeasure launchers retrofitted to its hull. Scout unit will enter deployment range in 30 seconds, the tactical officer announced. Non-essential systems powered down, Ella reported from engineering. We're running silent except for defensive systems. Deploy countermeasures on my mark, Ravi ordered, watching the scout's approach vector. 3, 2, 1, mark. The bountiful harvest shuddered slightly as the countermeasure pods ejected, spreading out into a calculated pattern approximately 5,000 kilometers from their position. The silver particles, processed specifically for space deployment, dispersed into a cloud formation that would be nearly invisible to normal sensors, but devastating to Nurax systems. "Scout has altered course," the tactical officer reported. "It appears to be conducting a standard search pattern around the asteroid field." "It hasn't detected us yet," Foster observed. "But it will," Ravi said. "These scouts are thorough. The question is whether it encounters our countermeasure cloud first." For several tense minutes, they tracked the scouts' methodical sweep through the asteroid field. It moved with the precision of a machine unburdened by human limitations, its sensors probing each significant mass for signs of activity. "Down the edge of the countermeasure zone," the tactical officer announced. "Estimated contact in 15 seconds. Everyone on the command deck held their breath as the scout's energy signature entered the nearly invisible cloud of silver particles. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the signature flickered, energy readings fluctuating wildly. "Direct hit," the tactical officer confirmed. "Scout's systems are destabilizing. Maintain distance," Ravi ordered. "Monitor for self-destruct sequences." The scout's signature continued to deteriorate, its organized energy pattern dissolving into chaotic emissions. No self-destruct occurred. The silver particles had likely disrupted its systems too quickly for defensive protocols to activate. "Scout is neutralized," Foster announced, relief evident in his voice. "No signals detected. I don't believe it managed to transmit a warning." "Prepare a recovery team," Ravi decided. "I want whatever's left of that unit collected for analysis." As the tension on the command deck eased slightly, Ravi returned his attention to the mining operation. The encounter had cost them valuable time, pushing them even further behind Earth's demanding quota. "Status of the drilling framework?" he asked. "Intact and stable," Rodriguez reported. "The gravitational fluctuation has passed, and the structure performed better than expected. We can begin primary extraction as soon as the recovery team secures the Nurax scout." Ravi nodded, already calculating the adjustments to their timeline. "Reconfigure the main drilling assembly for immediate deployment once the area is secured. We'll operate continuously through the next 3 shift cycles." "The crews are already exhausted," Ella pointed out, concern evident in her voice. "No," Ravi acknowledged. "But we've just confirmed that the Nurax are expanding into this system. Every hour counts now." Foster stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If this was just a scout, the main swarm can't be far behind. We should consider evacuating this operation while we still can." "And abandon the largest silver deposit we've ever found?" Ravi shook his head. "This asteroid could supply enough silver to protect every human settlement for years. We need to extract as much as possible before considering evacuation." "At what risk?" Foster pressed. "Calculated risk," Ravi replied, using the same phrase that had become almost a mantra for their operations. "We continue mining while deploying an expanded countermeasure perimeter. If we detect a full swarm approach, then we evacuate." Foster considered this for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll inform Admiral Dodge of our situation. He'll likely dispatch additional defensive vessels." "Good. In the meantime, we work faster," Ravi said, turning back to the asteroid display. "Much faster." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. The recovery team successfully retrieved fragments of the Nurax scout, confirming it was an advanced reconnaissance model similar to those encountered in the Procyon system. More concerning, its internal data storage contained coordinates of multiple human settlements, suggesting a systematic mapping operation underway. Meanwhile, the modified drilling framework performed beyond expectations, allowing them to penetrate the asteroid's dense outer layers and reach the rich silver deposits within its core. The processing facility aboard the Horizon operated at maximum capacity, refining the raw ore into the specialized silver compounds required for the countermeasure systems. Ravi stood in the processing control room of the bountiful harvest, monitoring the extraction metrics while simultaneously reviewing the analysis of the Nurax scout's remains. The scout's technological sophistication exceeded previous encounters, suggesting the ancient machines were indeed evolving their designs. adapting to the threat that silver posed to their systems. "Production update," Ella reported, joining him at the monitoring station. "We've extracted 320,000 metric tons in the past 48 hours. Processing efficiency is at 94%. At current rates, we'll reach 800 metric tons by the deadline." "Still short of the million-ton quota," Ravi noted, though the achievement was nonetheless remarkable given their circumstances. "The new drilling heads we fabricated are showing signs of material fatigue. We'll need to rotate them in the next 12 hours or risk catastrophic failure." Ravi nodded, adding this to his mental calculation of their timeline. The swift messenger arrived with the additional power modules. "Have them installed immediately, so we can bring the tertiary extraction system online." The door to the control room slid open, admitting Commander Foster alongside a tall, distinguished man Ravi recognized instantly, Admiral Harry Dodge. The Admiral's presence, unannounced and unexpected, could only mean significant developments. "Admiral," Ravi greeted him, straightening reflexively, "we weren't informed of your arrival." "Security protocols," Dodge explained, his expression somber. "The Nurax situation has escalated considerably in the past 24 hours. The scout we neutralized? Part of a coordinated reconnaissance effort spanning 3 sectors," Dodge confirmed. "We have detected similar units in the Sol system, Proxima Centauri and Tau Ceti. Earth's Security Council believes this represents the beginning of a major offensive." The implications were clear and disturbing. After months of defensive victories using the silver countermeasures, the Nurax were potentially shifting strategies, perhaps attempting to identify vulnerabilities or developing countermeasures of their own. "How does this affect our operation here?" Ravi asked. "It makes it even more critical," Dodge replied. "The Security Council has upgraded your quota to 1.5 million metric tons, with accelerated delivery timelines. Every major settlement is being fortified with enhanced silver defensive systems in anticipation of coordinated attacks." Ravi exchanged a glance with Ella, both of them calculating the immense challenge this represented. "Admiral, we're already pushing this equipment well beyond safe operational parameters. To increase production by 50% and accelerate the timeline is necessary for survival," Dodge finished firmly. "I've brought reinforcements. The Vigilant and the Dauntless are taking up defensive positions around this asteroid field, and I've assigned additional engineering teams to assist with your extraction efforts." "And if the Nurax launch a full assault before we complete the extraction?" Foster asked. "Then we defend this position with everything we have," Dodge stated simply. "This asteroid represents our best chance of producing enough silver to protect our core worlds. We cannot, will not, abandon it unless absolutely necessary." After the Admiral departed to inspect the defensive preparations, Ravi and Ella returned to the practical challenges of meeting the increased quota. "We'll need to deploy the experimental deep core extractors," Ella said, bringing up the designs they had developed but deemed too risky to implement. "It's the only way to achieve the volume they're asking for." The deep core extractors were a radical approach, designed to tap directly into the asteroid's central mass, where silver concentration was highest. The risk was substantial, potentially destabilizing the entire asteroid or triggering a cascading gravitational reaction that could endanger the entire operation. "Begin fabrication," Ravi decided. "But we implement enhanced safety protocols. No corners cut on the structural integrity systems." Ella nodded, already updating the production schedules on her tablet. "I'll oversee the fabrication personally. With the additional engineers, we can have the system ready in 18 hours. As she departed, Ravi turned his attention to the tactical situation. The recovered Nurax scout had provided valuable intelligence, but also confirmed their worst fears. The ancient machines were adapting to humanity's defensive strategies. He brought up the analysis of the scout's internal systems, noting the modifications that hadn't been present in previous Nurax units. The scout had incorporated new shielding technologies specifically designed to resist silver penetration. Not fully effective, but a concerning development nonetheless. "They're learning," Foster observed, joining him at the display. just as they adapted to other threats over millions of years. But not quickly enough, Ravi pointed out. Our countermeasures still neutralized this unit effectively, and now we know the direction of their adaptations. We can modify our silver compounds accordingly. Foster studied the readouts thoughtfully. There's something else bothering me about this scout. Its trajectory and search pattern. It seemed almost like it was looking specifically for this asteroid, not just conducting a standard reconnaissance. The observation sent a chill through Ravi. You think they know about the silver deposits here? It's possible. If these asteroids were indeed created by the same civilization that built the Nurax, perhaps their programming includes knowledge of these resource caches. Which means they could be targeting our operation specifically, not just encountering it by chance, Ravi concluded. We need to accelerate our countermeasure deployment around the entire asteroid field. Foster nodded grimly. I'll coordinate with the Vigilant and Dauntless. We'll establish a multi-layered defense perimeter. As Foster departed to implement the defensive preparations, Ravi remained in the control room, watching the extraction metrics continue to climb. Beyond the viewports, the darkness of space concealed both promise and threat. The rich silver deposits that could save humanity, and the ancient machines programmed to ensure its destruction. 1 million metric tons. Then 1.5 million. Numbers that represented not just production quotas but lives saved, colonies preserved, a species granted the chance to continue. From his beginnings as a maintenance technician focused on redundant systems for a single outpost, Ravi now stood at the center of humanity's greatest industrial effort, mining the very stars for the resources needed to survive. The bountiful harvest shuddered slightly as another load of silver ore moved through its processing systems. Despite its improvised nature and the overwhelming odds against them, the operation continued, hour by hour, ton by ton, building humanity's shield against the darkness. Calculated risk, Ravi murmured to himself. Always calculated risk. But as the stars shone coldly through the viewport, he wondered if any human calculation could truly account for the complexities of a conflict set in motion millions of years before humanity's first ancestors walked the earth. A conflict they had stumbled into unwittingly and now fought with determination and the silver gifts of a world called Cabria. We can't keep patching these drilling systems forever, Ravi said, examining the latest breakdown report on his tablet. The extraction operation had been running for 3 weeks now, and while they'd made remarkable progress, over 600,000 metric tons of processed silver, the equipment failures were becoming more frequent and more severe. We're losing too much time on repairs. I might have a solution for that, came a voice from the doorway of the command module. Ravi looked up to see a tall, lean man with weather-beaten features and eyes that seemed to observe everything simultaneously. Jim, just Jim, no last name offered or requested, stood with his arms folded, a battered tool belt slung low across his hips. The man had joined their operation a year ago, recruited from a remote outpost where he'd been the sole inhabitant by choice. Let me guess, Ravi said with a tired smile. Another miracle from the man who doesn't exist in any personnel database. Jim shrugged, the ghost of a smile crossing his otherwise impassive face. Databases are overrated. Solutions aren't. Since joining Ravi's team, Jim had proven himself to be something of an enigma, intensely private, often disappearing for days at a time to work on projects he refused to discuss until they were completed. But his contributions had been undeniable. His genius with electronics, robotics, and improvised systems had saved numerous operations and accelerated production beyond what should have been possible with their limited resources. "What have you got?" Ravi asked, setting aside the tablet. Jim gestured for Ravi to follow him to the ship's converted cargo bay, now serving as an impromptu workshop. Inside, several crew members were gathered around what appeared to be a cluster of metallic objects, each about the size of a small rover. Mining drones, Jim explained, approaching the nearest unit, fully autonomous, hardened against radiation and extreme temperatures, with adaptive drilling systems that can reconfigure based on material density. Ravi circled the nearest drone, noting the unusual configuration of its components. "These don't look like standard Earth Defense Fleet technology." "They're not," Jim confirmed. "I reverse-engineered some of the Nurax silicon processing modules we recovered from the Scout. Repurposed their adaptive properties to serve our needs instead of trying to kill us." Ella, who had joined them in the cargo bay, looked concerned. "You using Nurax technology? Is that safe?" "Safer than continuing with equipment that fails every 12 hours, Jim replied matter-of-factly. "I've stripped out all communication systems and autonomous decision-making components. These are tools, not threats." Ravi studied the drones more carefully, recognizing components salvaged from agricultural machinery alongside the sleek, otherworldly elements that had to have come from Nurax technology. It was an unsettling combination, human ingenuity merged with the very systems designed to eradicate them. "How many have you built?" he asked. 12 operational, 8 more in final assembly," Jim answered. "Each unit can extract approximately 150% of what our current rigs manage, with only 20% of the downtime. Deploy them in coordinated clusters, and we're looking at a 400% increase in production efficiency." The numbers were compelling, but Ravi had learned to be cautious about solutions that seemed too good to be true. "What's the power draw?" "Minimal," Jim said. "They incorporate the Nurax energy conversion systems, incredibly efficient. Each unit can operate continuously for approximately 72 hours before requiring a recharge." "And the risk of these things somehow reverting to their original programming?" Commander Foster asked, having entered the cargo bay unnoticed. Jim met his gaze steadily. "Zero. I didn't just repurpose their technology. I fundamentally rewrote it. These units couldn't become Nurax weapons any more than your comlink could spontaneously transform into a toaster." After a thorough inspection by both engineering and security teams, Ravi authorized a test deployment of 4 units to a secondary extraction site on the asteroid. The results were even better than Jim had predicted. A 500% increase in extraction rates, with 0 equipment failures over a 36-hour test period. Within a week, all 20 drones were operational, working in synchronized patterns across the asteroid's surface and penetrating to depths previously unreachable with their conventional equipment. Production numbers soared, putting them back on track to meet even the increased quota demanded by Earth Command. But Jim wasn't finished innovating. 3 days after the drone deployment, he approached Ravi in the observation deck where Ravi was monitoring the extraction progress. "I've been studying the asteroid field's composition and orbital patterns," Jim said without preamble, activating a holographic display from his personal device. A detailed star chart appeared showing the Cambrian system with particular focus on a small rocky planet in the inner orbital path. "Halcyon," Ravi identified the planet. "Uninhabitable, high surface temperatures, toxic atmosphere, extreme radiation levels." Jim nodded. "And our solution to the resource bottleneck?" He manipulated the display, showing a simulation of redirected asteroids, smaller ones from the outer belt, impacting Halcyon's surface at precise coordinates. "Controlled asteroid impacts," Jim explained. "We direct smaller, silver-rich asteroids to collide with Halcyon at these specific points. The impacts expose the planetary mantle, creating easier access to not just the asteroid material, but potentially untapped planetary resources as well." Ravi studied the simulation, noting the precision of the calculated impact trajectories. The energy required to alter asteroid trajectories on this scale would be enormous. "Not with the right approach," Jim countered. "I've designed automated navigation packages that can be attached to the smaller asteroids. Solar-powered thrusters provide minimal but consistent acceleration over time, small course corrections over weeks rather than massive thrust all at once." The concept was audacious but theoretically sound. By converting Halcyon into a processing center, essentially using the planet itself as a massive mining facility, they could dramatically increase both extraction and processing capacity. We'd need ships to retrieve the processed materials, Ravi noted. The bountiful harvest and horizon can't handle that kind of operation alone. Already addressed, Jem said, switching the display to show designs for small automated retrieval vessels. These can be constructed using materials we're already extracting. Simple designs, minimal crew requirements, focused entirely on hauling capacity. You're talking about establishing a full-scale industrial operation in orbit around Halcyon? Ravi realized. Jem nodded. Phase 1 of breaking Earth's resource dependency. We build ships to retrieve silver. Those same ships can eventually transport other valuable resources, iron, nickel, titanium, materials the colony needs for self-sufficiency. The scope of Jim's vision went far beyond meeting Earth's immediate quota. It was about establishing a sustainable industrial infrastructure that could support both the war effort and Cabria's long-term development. After consulting with Earth Command and receiving reluctant approval, accompanied by additional resources and technical support, the Halcyon Initiative began. The first targeted asteroid impacts occurred 3 weeks later with spectacular results. Massive plumes of material ejected from Halcyon's surface, creating accessible deposits of both asteroid and planetary resources. The automated retrieval ships, nicknamed Silverfish by the crews, proved remarkably effective. Small, agile, and operating with minimal power requirements, they ferried tons of raw material from Halcyon's orbit back to the processing facilities near Cabria. Production doubled, then tripled. By the 2-month mark, they had not only met Earth's quota of 1.5 million metric tons, but exceeded it by 20%. Earth Command is impressed, Commander Foster told Ravi during a status briefing. They're increasing shipments of silver countermeasures to all major fronts. The Nurax offensive in the Proxima system has been completely halted. And the Tau Ceti colonies? Ravi asked, thinking of the settlements that had been on the verge of falling when the operation began. Secured, Foster confirmed. The defensive perimeters held. We're actually pushing the Nurax back in that sector for the first time. It was welcome news. But Ravi had learned to be cautious about celebrating victories too early. The war continued on multiple fronts, and the Nurax had demonstrated remarkable adaptability throughout the conflict. His caution proved warranted when, during a routine perimeter scan, the defense sensors detected multiple energy signatures approaching from the system's outer boundary. Not just scouts this time, but what appeared to be a full Nurax strike force. 12 major units, possibly more in stealth configuration, reported the tactical officer. Approach vector suggests they're targeting our operations specifically. Time to intercept? Ravi asked, studying the tactical display. Approximately 72 hours at current velocity. Ravi turned to Jim, who had been working on upgrades to the defense systems. How close are we on the automated defense platforms? 6 operational, 4 more nearly complete, Jim replied. Enough to create a defensive screen around our primary facilities, but not sufficient for a system-wide defense. The automated defense platforms were Jim's latest adaptation of Nurax technology. Autonomous units designed specifically to deploy silver countermeasures against approaching Nurax forces. Like the mining drones, they represented an ironic repurposing of the enemy's own technology against them. Begin immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel, Ravi ordered. Priority on research data and silver stockpiles. All production facilities to switch to manufacturing defensive countermeasures. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of activity. The bountiful harvest was converted from a mining command center to a defensive coordination hub, not for the military response, but for Ravi's civilian mining operation. The mining drones were reprogrammed to serve as mobile, silver deployment platforms that could be utilized by the military if needed. Every available resource under Ravi's control was directed toward preparing for the coming assault. Jim worked tirelessly, finalizing the defense platforms and modifying the Silverfish retrieval ships to serve as nimble silver delivery systems. His understanding of Nurax technology proved invaluable. allowing him to create defensive systems that could potentially help protect the mining operations. "They're learning," he told Ravi during a rare break, both of them studying the tactical display showing the approaching Nurax force. "This isn't a random attack. They're targeting our silver production specifically. They've identified it as the primary threat, which means they understand the concept of strategic resources," Ravi noted. "That's more sophisticated behavior than we've observed before." Jim nodded grimly. "They're evolving their tactics. The ancient programming is adapting to current circumstances. If they can neutralize our silver production capabilities..." He didn't need to finish the thought. Without silver countermeasures, humanity's primary advantage against the Nurax would vanish. The war would revert to the desperate holding action it had been before Cabria's discovery. As the deadline approached, Admiral Dodge arrived with reinforcements, 3 Defense Fleet vessels equipped with the latest silver delivery systems. The Admiral immediately established command of the system's defense, delegating Commodore Herrick as the tactical commander for the coming battle. "Mr. Cobbler," Admiral Dodge addressed Ravi during a briefing with the civilian operation leaders, "your mining operation is now under military protection. Commodore Herrick will coordinate all defensive actions. Your responsibility is to secure your personnel and continue silver production where possible." "My operation has defensive capabilities," Ravi pointed out, gesturing to Jim's automated platforms and the modified mining drones. "We've developed systems specifically designed to counter Nurax tactics." Admiral Dodge assessed Jim with a calculating gaze. "Your innovations are impressive, but this will be a military operation. Your defensive assets will be coordinated through our command structure." "We understand," Ravi replied, though he exchanged a glance with Jim that suggested they might have their own contingency plans. The military established their defensive perimeter in a layered configuration. Outer sensors to provide early warning, then the Defense Fleet vessels as the main battle line. Jim's automated platforms were integrated into the defense network, but under military control. The Bountiful Harvest and other civilian vessels were positioned in the system's rear quadrant, ready to evacuate if necessary. When the Nurax force arrived, it was with a coordination and tactical sophistication that exceeded all previous encounters. The units moved in formation, clearly employing strategies designed to counter known silver deployment methods. Some units appeared to have modified shielding specifically created to resist silver penetration. From the civilian observation center aboard the Bountiful Harvest, Ravi, Ella, and Jim watched as the military engaged the Nurax force. Their role was now that of spectators and resource providers, not combatants. "Commodore Herrick is employing standard containment tactics," Jim observed, his tone suggesting he disagreed with the approach. "The Nurax have obviously adapted to those patterns." "Not our call to make," Ravi reminded him, though his frustration was evident. "Our job is to keep the mining operation intact and ready to resume production as soon as possible." The battle unfolded before them on tactical displays, the military vessels maneuvering to deploy silver countermeasures while the Nurax units executed surprisingly sophisticated evasive tactics. Several of the automated defense platforms were destroyed in the initial exchange, their silver deployment patterns too predictable for the evolving Nurax units. "They're breaking through Sector 7, Ella noted with alarm, in the agency and puts them on a direct vector toward the Halcyon operation. Ravi immediately opened a communication channel to military command. "Admiral, the Nurax are targeting our primary production facility at Halcyon. Request immediate defensive coverage." "All military assets are engaged, Mr. Cobbler," came the terse reply. "Secure your personnel and prepare for possible evacuation." As the communication ended, Ravi turned to Jim. "Options?" Jim was already accessing the control systems for the remaining automated platforms and the modified Silverfish vessels that fell under their civilian authority. "The military's silver deployment pattern is too uniform. The Nurax have adapted to it. We need to introduce randomized distribution vectors." "Can you implement that with our remaining assets?" Ravi asked. "Yes, but it would mean operating independently of the military command structure," Jim pointed out. They've explicitly ordered us to stand down our defensive systems. Ravi considered this for only a moment. The Silver operation is our responsibility. Do what you need to do. With a nod, Jim began reconfiguring their defensive assets, implementing deployment patterns that seemed chaotic but actually followed complex algorithms designed to counter Nurax's adaptive capabilities. The Silverfish vessels, ostensibly retreating from the conflict zone, instead positioned themselves to create a secondary defensive screen, specifically protecting the Halcyon operation. When a group of Nurax units broke through the military perimeter and accelerated toward Halcyon, they encountered this unexpected secondary defense, one operating on principles they hadn't yet adapted to counter. Nurax units are slowing, Ella reported, monitoring the tactical display. They appear to be analyzing the new deployment pattern. That gives us an opening, Jim said, finalizing a command sequence, initiating disruptive transmission. From several of the automated platforms, a targeted signal broadcast directly into the Nurax command protocols, temporarily fragmenting their coordination. It wasn't a tactic the military had employed, perhaps unaware it was even possible. The effect was immediate but limited. The Nurax units approaching Halcyon faltered, their formation breaking apart briefly before beginning to reorganize. But in that moment of confusion, both the civilian defensive assets and the nearest military vessels were able to deploy Silver countermeasures with devastating effectiveness. Nurax's advance toward Halcyon has been halted, Ella confirmed. Military vessels are moving to secure the sector. An incoming communication alert sounded, and Admiral Dodge's face appeared on the main display, his expression a mixture of irritation and grudging respect. "Mr. Cotler, I believe we had an understanding about chain of command during this engagement." "My apologies, Admiral," Ravi replied diplomatically. "There appears to have been a miscommunication regarding the operational status of our defensive systems. They activated automatically when Nurax units approached critical infrastructure." The Admiral's expression suggested he didn't believe this explanation for a moment, but the tactical situation demanded his attention elsewhere. "We'll discuss this malfunction after the engagement is concluded. Dodge out." As the communication ended, Ravi turned to Jim. "That disruption signal. That's not something you developed from studying a damaged scout unit." Jim met his gaze steadily. "No, it's not." "Who are you really?" Ravi asked. "And how do you know so much about Nurax technology?" For a long moment Jim was silent, seemingly weighing his response carefully. "I was part of an Earth-deep research team," he finally said. "Before the war became public knowledge, when the first Nurax activations were still classified incidents. We studied recovered Nurax components, trying to understand what they were and how they functioned." "That doesn't explain your level of expertise," Ravi pressed, "or why you'd be living alone on a frontier world instead of working with Earth's defense research divisions." Jim's expression darkened. "Because I warned them. Years before the coordinated attacks began, I recognized the patterns in the Nurax programming. The distributed awakening protocols, the adaptive learning mechanisms. I predicted exactly how the conflict would unfold, and I was ignored." "So you isolated yourself? Abandoned the fight?" "I prepared," Jim corrected. "Gathered knowledge, developed countermeasures, waited for the moment when someone would finally be ready to listen. When I heard about Cabria's Silver discovery and your production operation, I knew that moment had come." Their revelation cast Jim's contributions in a new light. Not just remarkable innovations from a gifted engineer, but the calculated implementations of years of focused research. "You should have told us," Ravi said. "Would Earth Command have trusted the strategic defense of humanity to someone they'd previously dismissed as paranoid?" Jim asked pointedly. "Or would they have locked me in a research facility extracting information while ignoring my recommendations?" Again, before Ravi could respond, the tactical alert sounded. The Nurax forces had regrouped and were beginning another approach, this time with noticeably modified formations. "They're learning even faster now," Jim observed, studying the sensor data. "Each engagement accelerates their adaptation curve." The battle continued for several more hours, with the military forces adapting their tactics based on what they'd observed from Jim's intervention. Ravi and his team remained in a support role, providing silver resources and tactical data, but no longer actively engaging in the combat. When the last Nurax unit had been neutralized or driven off, Ravi received a formal request to report to the Admiral's command vessel. He arrived to find not just Admiral Dodge, but several high-ranking officers from Earth Strategic Command. "Mr. Cobbler," Admiral Dodge began without preamble, "your intervention, while unauthorized, appears to have been critical to defending the Halcyon operation. More importantly, the disruptive technology employed by your associate represents a significant tactical advancement." One of the Earth officers, a stern-faced general with more decorations than Ravi had ever seen on a single uniform, leaned forward. "We want to speak with this Jim person, immediately." "He's a civilian contractor under my authority," Ravi replied carefully. "Any discussions regarding his expertise or innovations should include representation from our operation." The general's expression hardened, but Admiral Dodge intervened. "Agreed. This situation requires cooperation, not conscription. Schedule a proper briefing for tomorrow. We all want the same thing here: to end this Nurax threat, once and for all." As Ravi returned to the bountiful harvest, he reflected on the strange position he now occupied. A businessman whose mining operation had become central to humanity's war effort, neither fully military nor merely civilian, operating in the complex space between resource extraction and species survival. In his workshop, Jim was already designing improvements to the defense systems based on data from the recent engagements, seemingly unconcerned about the military's interests in his expertise. "They want to meet with you," Ravi informed him, "formally this time." Jim didn't even look up from his workbench, where he was disassembling what appeared to be part of a Nurax communication array. "A happening," he replied flatly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "They seemed quite insistent," Ravi pressed. "They've realized the value of your insights." Jim set down his tools with deliberate care and finally looked up, his eyes hard. "Listen carefully, Ravi. I don't do government. I don't do military. I don't do committees, briefings, or official anything. The moment they get their hands on me, I'll disappear into some classified facility and everything I know goes with me." He gestured at the workshop around him, filled with half-completed projects and improvised technology. "I work here because you let me work. You pay me in things that matter: gold, silver, supplies, not promises or patriotic speeches. You gave me those bug-out shelters across Cabria that nobody else knows about. I trust you, Ravi. I like the cut of your jib." The colloquialism sounded strange in Jim's usually precise speech. He turned back to his work. "Tell them I died in the attack. Tell them I never existed. Tell them whatever you want, but I'm not meeting them, not now, not ever." "They could force the issue," Ravi warned. Jim smiled thinly without looking up. "They could try. But we both know I've prepared for that contingency. If they push, I vanish. Then nobody gets my help." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a data crystal, sliding it across the workbench toward Ravi. "Give them this instead. It contains schematics for 3 defensive systems I've designed based on what we learned today. Basic stuff, nothing too advanced, but enough to keep them busy and make them think they've gotten something valuable." Ravi picked up the crystal, weighing both it and Jim's words carefully. "And what about the real insights? The disruptive signal technology, the Nurax command protocols?" "Those stay with us," Jim said, his focus returning to his disassembly work. "If the military had the capacity to properly use that information, they would have won this war years ago. I'll keep developing systems for your operation, Ravi. You keep mining silver. Together, we'll do more good than I ever could locked in some government lab." Ravi nodded slowly, understanding the bargain that had been struck. Jim would remain his brilliant, reclusive asset, and in exchange, Ravi would shield him from unwanted attention, military or otherwise. "I'll handle it," Ravi promised. But they won't be happy. Being happy isn't their job, Jim replied, already lost in his work once more. Winning the war is. And this way they still get the tools to do it, just not control of the toolmaker. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.